Redditors, what is the most F up thing you have ever done? When I was married, my ex-wife and I went to a bar with a couple friend. They were more her friends than mine. The wife of the couple made it clear she didn't like me and spent the evening taking as many shots at me as possible. As she got drunker, the insults became more frequent and meaner. My attempts to fire back were stopped by her husband and my ex-wife. I was expected to take it but not give it. She went to the restroom and as she got off her chair, the leg broke and she face planted. Ex-wife and bitch went to the restroom. Husband of bitch went to find the manager. I swapped chairs with the table next to ours and told the manager that the injury, a broken nose, wasn't due to a broken chair, but because she was drunk and fell over. My grandpa was retired early due to disability and watched me during the day all summer until I was 11-12 and could chill alone after school. He spoiled the shit out of me, took me to amusement parks, brought me to toy stores, all sorts of stuff. My parents told him to dial it back because I was being an entitled shit to them when I was 6-7. After this happened, I told my grandpa I wanted to go to the amusement park one day. He told me that my parents said no, but maybe we could go next week or the week after. I got incredibly upset. Being the manipulative sociopath I was, I put on the waterworks. He just said he was sorry and that he didn't want to upset my parents. So I looked at him and said, "You just don't love me anymore, do you?" He got really sad after I said that and told me that he loved me very much, but we couldn't go. So I just kept going. "Why don't you love me?" Every time I said it, he got more and more distraught. Then he started to cry. I made my 56-year-old grandfather cry. The sweetest man I've ever known. The image of him crying while saying, "Please don't say things like that," is so deeply seared in my mind. I think it was one of the most important moments of my childhood as far as my emotional development. At the time I couldn't process it immediately. I didn't even apologize. I just went to my room. He didn't even tell my parents what happened. My mom said that around that time, it seemed like I matured a decade. I was quiet, polite, and incredibly well behaved. I treated my grandpa much nicer from that point forward. I couldn't bring myself to apologize for it until in my late teens, when he was dying of cancer and I found out that he wasn't even blood related to me. He was my mom's stepdad. Just one of the best people humanity could offer, and I owe so much of who I've become to him. Edit. Thank you for the kind words, everyone. I'm not an outwardly emotional person, but I cried a bit writing this in my office. I appreciate the shed tears on mine and my grandpa's behalf. Edit. Some people are asking about what he said when I apologized. I mentioned it in a couple comments, but he didn't remember what I was talking about when I brought it up. He wasn't the type of person to hold on to something like that. He just laughed and told me that I shouldn't have dwelled on it for so long. I cheated on my wife a month after our third son was born. It sucks that I can't take that back 18 years later and I still don't feel like I can ask for forgiveness. It happened in 2004. I moved out. We went through therapy. We talked about the whys and the what to do nows. I was over at our house with the kids and was watching the ALCS while we played. She was on the couch. That was the year Boston came back to beat the Yankees, and I think it was game 7. But I'm not sure. She was never a baseball on television person, but she really followed the Sox that postseason. After the WS was over, I was over working in the yard and the kids were playing outside. She came out with a box for me. Inside the box was a Red Sox hat. We live in Atlanta, and I'm not a Sox fan. Inside of the hat was a note from my wife that said, "I figure, if Boston can come back and beat the odds, so can we. I love you." I still have that note in my wallet, as a reminder that the thrill of the chase isn't as thrilling as finishing the race with the person I started it with. You know how people bag up their leaves and leave them out by the street? As a teen, we used to go out at night and dump them back out on people's lawns. Thinking about it now, I would be so pissed if someone did that to me. We used to super glue pennies onto the keyholes of people's mailboxes. Those community styles ones, where there's 16 small boxes and a big one. Was riding the bus home from school one day and saw a guy absolutely smashing the shit out of his mailbox with the tip of a shovel, trying to pry that penny off. Now that I'm an adult, I would probably burn down the planet in my rage if someone did that to me. Ugh. This was an embarrassing one that I hope no one ever finds out. One night a few years ago, my boyfriend and his family, get Chinese food from our favorite little place. For some reason this night it doesn't sit well with me. An hour after eating I get that intensely sick feeling. Like you have to poop so bad that you want to throw up. Whatever. I go upstairs and destroy the bathroom. It's important to note, there's 2 bathrooms upstairs and none downstairs, which is like a little apartment where my boyfriend and I stay. After I'm sure my bowels are empty, I go back down to lay in bed. Thought I could nap it off. About 30 seconds after laying down, I get the urge to go again. I run upstairs and to my horror, both bathrooms are occupied. His sister is refusing to get out of the shower, even though it's an emergency, and his dad is blowing up the other toilet, presumably suffering a similar fate to mine. I begrudgingly go sit in bed and contemplate my options as the bubbling in my gut grows worse. Bust down the bathroom door and traumatize his sister? Make the 30-minute drive home? No, it was urgent. I even thought about shitting my pants, against my will, and dealing with the embarrassment. God, I don't want to subject my future in-laws to that. I begrudgingly realize my only option is to go outside like nature intended. Their yard is very open and it was a super bright moonlit night, so there was no place to do it without feeling super exposed, except for under the trampoline. My thought process was, no one has used the trampoline for years, and it's out of sight walking range, so no one could accidentally step in it. Great. I do my business. Get soaked in the process. It was slightly raining, and the trampoline was pouring water on me. Clean up with napkins and wet wipes. Come inside. Immediately throw up in the trash can from the shock, embarrassment, anxiety, sickness. Clean that up, and immediately go to bed. Everything was fine for a few days, until my boyfriend's dad lightheartedly tells me how he was late for work that morning. The dog had rolled in some shit, and he had to get a bath. I felt like throwing up all over again, but thankfully everyone just suspected it was some type of animal poop. I flew to Morocco for vacation a couple of years ago, and one day due to acclimatization issues while in the swimming pool, I realized that in an extremely near future I'm gonna have an explosive diarrhea. I ran to my hotel room and almost made it to my room, but not quite. Long story short, since there was nobody on the hotel floor cause it was lunchtime, and I knew from the deep of my heart that I wouldn't make it to my room, I unleashed a load of my liquid chocolate thunder into a huge flower pot that was on the floor. Some poor hotel maid was definitely forced to clean that out, and I couldn't even tip her. Similar story from me. About 10 years ago, I bought a blender for smoothies, trying to eat healthier in the mornings. Put way too much fruit in the smoothie that morning, and halfway into my hour-long bus ride, knew I wasn't making it into work before absolutely exploding. Rang the bell, got off the bus in a suburb, no businesses around, and no time left to hold it in. I ran into someone's backyard bushes and painted their fence a deeper shade of brown. I'm sorry, random family, not the kind of stain you were expecting on your fence. When I was young, some people in my neighborhood always complained to me and the other children about everything. We couldn't play football in D Street or make too much noise, or hide behind their car while playing hide and seek, etc. One day we had enough of it and took their garden hose and stuck it in the mailbox. That in my country is the opening in the door, and turned it on and ran away. I don't even want to know how much water damage they had because of that. I'm gonna rat my little sister out. During our parents' divorce and custody battle, we were forced to sit in on family counseling sessions. I was 12 and she was 8. We thought my mom was acting funny and might have been banging the counselor on the side for her own personal testimonial interests. Still not confirmed. So we were pissed off because we loved our mom and our dad. It seemed like the counselor favored our mom over our dad, and it got rough sometimes watching him become outed by the only two adult forces who didn't love him in this world. Anyway, my little sister and I were left alone in his office, and she decided she was gonna take a shit in his little trash can to assert dominance. It was asserted. We never went back. My hometown is generally pretty middle class to poor. There's a bunch of rich people that live in the woods, and one of them had a kid that went to our high school and bullied the F out of the kids that weren't as wealthy. That shithead grew up and bought a Camaro last summer and removed the muffler so it would be the loudest effing thing in town. On New Year's Eve of 2021, he decided to ruin a town tradition and lapped the town common with it during the tree lighting ceremony while people were caroling and giving thanks. Summer of last year, me and a friend decided it was time to get revenge because nobody wanted to do anything about it. My friend's dad owned a junkyard and they recently got an old train horn from a busted diesel that ended up there. We spent a good week getting it set up in the back of his work truck and decided to wait on it for a little while. A month or so later, we found out he was having a party of some kind with other rich folks and his family, but we didn't know what it was about, so we carefully parked outside his house on the opposite side of his fence. Right as it was starting, we blasted the train horn and peeled out before anyone knew what happened. News got out later, and we found out the party we bombed was actually a wake for his late grandfather. I stole a laptop from my old job. It was a brand new MacBook that they ordered one too many of and just sat in a closet for the 3 years I worked for this huge corporation. I was IT, so I knew how and had the ability to wipe it from all the records. I feel kinda bad about it, cause it's worth a lot, so a felony theft, but they really didn't even know it existed and I needed a computer. I chalk it up to all the unpaid OT I worked to make me feel better. I could only hit 40 by contract, and some jobs required more than that per week. One time, a girl I had minimal interest in, but had mutual shared friends with, had sent me a text basically saying, "I have feelings for you and I'd like to explore where that takes us." I then typed up a message to my good friend saying, "Please kill me now. I think she wants a relationship." Keep in mind, this girl was nice and all, but just wasn't my type. I'm also a people pleaser, so the thought of having to turn down someone makes me uncomfortable, and I dreaded having to tell her I wasn't interested. I've been turned down before. It sucks. I don't want to do that to someone else. I did not mean the "please kill me now" as a knock on her as a person, but as a I don't want to be in this situation. You can probably guess what happened though. Yep, I sent the "please kill me now" text to the girl after immediately realizing what I did and thinking for about 30 seconds how I could possibly talk my way out of not sounding like the biggest jerk in the entire world. I realized that there was no good way to spin that. I decided to just try my best to explain to her that it wasn't meant to be mean and blah blah blah. I also said that she didn't deserve that, blah blah blah. Didn't matter. I still cringe about it to this day. When I was about 15, a neighbor of ours stopped us in the road and chewed us out for riding our go-karts in the road. This despite the fact that it was a dirt road in a rural area, which was the perfect place for riding go-karts. He was a complete a-hole about it too. I don't know where I got the idea from, but I promptly went home, called the electric company, pretended to be the neighbor, and told them I wanted my electricity turned off as we were moving. It was the 80s, so they just looked the account up by name and address and promptly entered my request in the system. I'm sure it was just a minor inconvenience for them, but they deserved it in my opinion. I served a woman an eviction notice on Christmas Eve. She had just gotten out of the hospital and was bedridden on her couch while her husband slept the few hours he had between his 3 jobs. It's the worst thing I've ever done. I quit that job shortly afterwards. She was so nice too. I once had to serve a lawsuit on someone dying in hospice because my firm's client was suing her over some stupid petty shit. Like literally had to walk up to her bed as she lay there dying and let her know she was getting sued in a neighbor dispute. Then she died and I had to change the lawsuit to sue her estate instead. Effing hell. Made an unwarranted nasty comment about one of my closest friends in an effort to seem cool, and she was sitting right there across the room, heard it, went red in the face, and looked like she was about to cry. I wanted to die right then and there, and I would have deserved it. Edit. It should be noted that I was a 7th grade pubescent shithead at the time. It was a dim chapter, of which I'm not the least bit proud. Yes, I begged her forgiveness, which I didn't deserve, but she nevertheless gave me. Yes, it still haunts me, and yes, I very much learned my lesson, one I hope to pass on to my son, by being just as brutally honest with him about the very shitty thing I did to another human being, friend or foe. It was a super wrong, super not good thing to do. The day before I stopped drinking alcohol altogether, I was in a really dark place for a number of reasons, and I was absolutely using alcohol as a crutch. One of the reasons why I was in such a bad place, emotionally, was because my cousin was in decline due to glioblastoma. I was actively seeing this person that I loved dearly lose his sense of self and ability to understand conversations and situations. And he was young, just turned 50. There was a lot of light in the beginning, but considering that glioblastoma is effectively his stage less brain cancer, it was almost guaranteed he would lose the battle. The day that I stopped drinking altogether was the day that I was supposed to drive him to a research institute for his monthly treatment and check-in. It was the only time I was asked to take on that level of responsibility, as his wife would normally take him. I helped in a bunch of different ways, like hanging out with him when he'd otherwise be alone, but this appointment was pretty big. I depressedly drank myself into a stupor the night before and missed our meetup time. I'd said that I'd be there no matter what, and I wasn't. The appointment happened, and he reassured me everything was okay, as he knew the battle was over anyway, but I will never forgive myself for that. Even typing this out makes me feel like the biggest piece of shit. I wish I was sober then. Edit. A lot of people responded to this. Thank you for the kind words and reassurance. Edit 2. Even more people responded to this, and it's had me thinking. I think it's just time that I heard this stuff. This happened almost 2 years ago now. When I do something that I regret, it becomes a loud voice in the silence. That's usually when I think about regrettable stuff and it's hard to turn off. This question made that voice really loud, and I think I'm going to try and reaffirm myself in those moments. It was a huge lesson in life, and I really do believe he'd be proud of me, as many have suggested. Thanks again. I'm a recovered heroin addict, 9 years sober, and I have a lot of stories of how much of a shit person I used to be. I really can't gauge what my worst moment would be, but I can post a story or two definitely. One day, I was flat broke and on my last bag of dope. My neighborhood pharmacist just recently was arrested for a DUI. Brainstorming, I came up with an idea to try and get some pills at the ER. I still had med insurance at the moment, so I thought this was my best option. My buddy came by, and we were hanging out outside, smoking a cigarette, and trying to figure out how to get hurt, just enough to get some pills, but not enough to actually have permanent repercussions. There was this big gas cinder block beside my garage, and I decided to drop it on my foot, in hopes of just breaking a toe at most. I stood outside on the concrete patio for about 5 minutes, with the cinder block, trying to hype myself up enough to drop it on my foot. I couldn't do it, psyched myself out too much. I told my friend that he would have to do it for me, and he said okay. He held it about waist high and dropped it on my foot. I knew it wasn't enough damage, so I told him that he needed to put it up higher and drop it again, to which he did. So go to the hospital, tell them that I was carrying boxes downstairs to the basement and drop them when I slipped on the bottom step. So I go back, get x-rays, and I am in the waiting room. DR comes in and tells me that I've torn numerous ligaments in my foot and probably would hurt less if I had just broke my foot. Hearing this, I was excited, thinking, yes, I just scored. I didn't care about the pain at the moment, just happy that I just potentially scored. They release me and hand me a script. They wrote me a script for ibuprofen 800 mg. Defeat. When I was 17, my grandma was dying. I didn't want her to die, so I demanded my grandpa to take her place, because nobody wanted him around. Edit. Story time. My whole grandpa beat the crap out of my grandma, and that's how she ended up in hospital. Then they found cancer, but it was too late. She was dying. I came to see her. I held her hand and said to my whole grandpa to die instead of her. I cried and cried, remembering all these times my whole grandpa abused me. He tried to run me over a few times. He'd kick me out of my hospital bed. so he can take a nap and so on. After he left, all of my family and relatives who were there cheered for me. Apparently I said what they were all thinking. They had a good laugh. Sometimes you can do really f up things without any intent or awareness. I was young and with a very nice woman who was struggling with some physical issues that resulted in a severe depression. We weren't living together, but I was regularly getting up early and going over to her place for breakfast and to kind of just check in and let her know I was there for her. I went drinking with some friends one night and I overslept the next morning. I called her to let her know I wouldn't make it. She committed it that day before I got back from work. I know now that what happened wasn't my fault and I wasn't responsible, at least not in some overt way. We all make our own decisions. Still, I will always wish I hadn't been careless and overslept that day. If I had the chance to change one decision I've made in my life, this would be it. Not trying to save a 6-year-old child after they got him out of the pool. Since we got laws about victim responsibility, if you save a victim from danger, you'll be fully responsible for their well-being, economically even. So you have to pay for their treatment and the family doesn't have to move a finger. They are even entitled to sue you. This is to prevent random people who don't know what are they doing to apply wrong treatment. Kinda ironic in hindsight, and because I was only given a single class in all my life about first aid, that did not stuck with my memory on how to do things properly about 7 years before the incident. So even if I tried, it was likely I would screw up and damage the kid. I can't even measure properly my own strength sometimes and break things very easily. I can't even think what would happen if I likely tried one of those movements to pump out water from the lungs on a kid. I could break the rib cage by accident. Apparently the other 30-50 people thought the same or not thinking at all. So they all just encircled the kid, moaning, crying, but doing nothing. Someone called in emergency services, but they arrived around 20 minutes later. The kid was already dead when they arrived. Not gonna lie, this still haunts me a bit today. It makes me feel a little better to unwind about this sometimes. I'm not completely sure if I could have done something without making things even worse. After my mother had a stroke that nearly rendered her paralyzed, I visited her in the hospital, and while she slept, I whispered in her ear that I hope she died and freed me from the burden of having her as a mother. I'm not sure if she heard me or not, but we don't talk anymore. For reference, she was incredibly abusive and neglectful of me all through my childhood. But saying those words felt like the worst thing I could have ever said to someone. Intentionally got pregnant at 15. I had a non-functional relationship at home with my mum. I was also groomed by a man nearly 10 years older than me. I ended up moving in with him. Mom claims I ran away. I think I was chucked out. Either way, she did nothing to try and find me. I realized this was a horrible situation, and I wanted to get away from him. I knew that at 16, I could claim benefits and housing in sheltered housing if I had a baby. He had sex with me multiple times. I did nothing to prevent a pregnancy. It's something I'd never admit to my child, ever. Did drugs at work. I was a teacher. I had a toddler. I was teaching 212 high school kids, going through last 2 classes for master's program, and my dad was dying of cancer. Husband was working a ton at new job, and I just didn't have it in me to do it all. Snorting Adderall saved my hide. I would crush 4 pills throughout day and snort every couple of hours. It gave me an energy boost, and I was able to focus on what needed doing. At night, I would take a sleeping pill, then do it all over again the next day. Edit. This was 15-16 years ago and I only did it for 1 school year. The reason I didn't take them orally is because I didn't get that rush of energy that allowed me to complete everything I needed to do. Thank you for those of you saying that it wasn't a big deal. I'm still embarrassed I did it. I would probably have been in huge trouble if I would have been caught, but at the time, I was so drained from everything. I did what I felt would be helpful. This is a story of revenge. I've never told it before. It's F up. but I still think I was justified. Many years ago I lived in Japan, where the English school business is a big business. A good friend of mine had put years of work into developing his own curriculum. I was his head teacher and helped develop several original educational textbooks for kids. He was ready to launch his school, but he needed financial backing, because trying to incorporate in Japan, as a foreigner, is close to impossible. He found a local businessman to help finance the operation. My friend put down $50,000 and the local businessman put down $51,000, giving him controlling share. I'm not sure exactly what happened. All I know is that the local businessman basically pulled out at the last minute and stole the $50,000 from my friend, and there was nothing my friend could do. This local businessman then decided to open up the school entirely on his own and cut my friend out using the material I had designed. This local businessman had never met me and didn't know that I existed, so my friend suggested that I reply to his advertisement in the newspaper, looking for a head teacher, and try to get hired, so we could bring the school down from the inside. I did, and I was hired as the head teacher, and was put in charge of setting up all the classrooms, getting all the supplementary books, all of the toys, games, setting up the class schedules, and even setting up all the computers and software needed to run the business. Literally everything. I spent 3 months preparing to launch the school, building the curriculum, printing flyers, talking to parents of the kids, and signing them up for classes. The whole 9 yards. But 2 days before the school was set to open, I got my revenge. I threw all the computers into the garbage bin, which was collected the next day, and changed all the passwords for all the cloud services. I then threw out my cell phone and disappeared. Because this guy was sketchy, he had always wanted to pay me in cash, so he didn't have my bank information, didn't have my actual mailing address, and I gave him a fake one to start. So when I disappeared, he literally had no way to know who I was, or how to find me. I found out through the grapevine later that this wound up costing that local businessman several $100,000, as he needed to pull cash from his other businesses to refinance this one, and basically start from scratch. He missed the beginning of the school year, and all of the parents that he had contracted with were pissed and cancelled, and he was never able to recoup them as clients. Basically, I cost him an entire year. I don't regret it for a second, because this guy stole $50,000 from my friend, and basically took advantage of some young entrepreneurs who were just trying to get their business started. He got what he deserved, and I now have a backstory as a corporate saboteur. 8th grade, it was the last week of school, and we had to turn in our end of the year history assignment. Now I was very lazy with school stuff, but would also get grounded if I got bad grades. I procrastinated so bad, to the point there wasn't really a way out of it. One day in class, our teacher tells us he has a stack of history projects that were turned in that didn't have a name on them. I get a light bulb. I go over to the stack and find a project on Civil War era weaponry, like cannons and stuff. Funny thing was, it actually did have a name on it. It was just written in pencil on black paper and hard to see. I erased the name, put my name on it, and turned it in. Never got caught. Sorry, Haley. I left one party after eating 2 boxes of mac and cheese. Walking home, local university girl starts chatting me up, invites me to a different party for 5 minutes before she takes me to her room. Go to Pound Town, fall asleep, wake up, and see my clothes and shoes all neatly folded up beside the bed by her and think, damn, that's really cute. Maybe in the morning we go to breakfast and I ask if this is a one-nighter, or if she wants to go on a real date. Notice a really bad smell. It's not me. Smells like vomit, but no vomit on the floor. Look at girl, covered in vomit. Realize vomit chunks are shaped like mac and cheese. Stealth mode engaged. Get clothes on and sneak to door. As I open door I hear, what the F? Run faster than Usain Bolt. We didn't have breakfast. Was night manager at fast food establishment during college. There was a bitter prank rivalry between our establishment and the Subway next to us. After months of prank escalation, I crammed a rotting hamburger patty in the handle of the Subway manager's trunk lid, so he went knuckle deep in rotting burger when he went home. That was the end of the prank war, and I've never forgiven myself for crossing the red line.